Consultants, members of the audience, those at home, welcome to the fourth day of the hearings, public hearings with respect to the Church of Scientology. We have heard this will probably be our fourth and final day of the city's position. We do hope that the Scientologists will take advantage of their time starting Monday and give their side of the issue and present their documents, but also their witnesses. We will be here Monday, anticipating their presence here. Before we start, I would like to start this meeting with a prayer given by Commissioner Jim Calderbank, and then rise him for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Police Chief Sidney Klein. Would you like to have us rise, sir?
No. Dear Father, we ask you for the strength and the ability to get through these very difficult times. We ask for your love and also your help in deciding what is the best for the people and the citizens of the city of Clearwater. We hope that we follow your way and that every day we have a new challenge and we can meet it with great minds and with conviction. Amen.
Chief?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Flint, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we start these proceedings, sir?
I do, Mayor. Mayor LaChair and members of the Commission, I'd like to make some brief comments about some of the things I stated in my opening that are particularly applicable to the evidence today. And these comments basically relate to the purposes of these hearings, which are not prosecutorial. We're not here to collect criminal evidence concerning the Church of Scientology in terms of trying to obtain indictments against individuals or of the organization. What we're here to do is to determine whether or not there have been deceptive sales and trade practices in connection with a number of different items of evidence that have been adduced already before this commission and will continue to be presented today. And those basically involve deception concerning Mr. Hubbard's background, upon which members have relied or would not have joined if they'd known about it. Confidentiality of auditing information. Deception in the purposes, goals, and practices of the organization. Deception concerning the article or device warning in the case that I referred to in my opening, which we will be getting in today. Deception concerning legal documents and the legal status of individuals who are entering or leaving the church. The conditions at the Fort Harrison, and both as they actually exist and as they are represented to individuals who are coming to the city, and some issues pertaining to the education of children. With regard to all of those issues, it is important to keep in mind that in order to prove that or present sufficient evidence before this commission that those practices have been taking place, the policies of the corporation have got to be examined, and they have got to be examined over a long period of time to determine whether they are sustained policies that not only appear in writing but in practice. And the only appropriate procedure for this commission to follow to determine whether or not those practices or those policies are actually practiced is to determine whether they're standardized and uniform. And the focus of that inquiry is whether or not they have been taking place over a long period of time as applied to a different cross-section of people, by which this commission can draw the inference that in fact they are uniform policies, they're uniformly practiced in many different locations, including the city of Clearwater, and that they do involve, they do involve the deceptive practices about which this commission is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a witness? Will you please be sworn in? Madam Clerk?
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Give us your name, please.
Lavenda Schaick.
Ms. Van Schaick, I'm going to ask you the same basic 5 standard questions I will ask every witness that we will hear during this proceedings. And they are, number 1, are you appearing today and testifying under oath voluntarily?
Yes, I am.
Have you been paid by anyone for your testimony other than expenses coming to Clearwater?
No.
Do you have a lawsuit against the Church of Scientology?
Yes, I do.
Does the Church of Scientology have a lawsuit against you?
Several.
Several. Has anyone suggested to you that you should state anything but the truth, or has anyone suggested that you change your testimony for any reason?
No.
Thank you. Would you like to make a statement, or would you like to go over what your story is?
I'd rather start. I don't want to get into the organization, basically as to what L. Ron Hubbard is, because there's a lot of testimony that has already been done on that. Basically, what I want to get into is a brief history. I started in Scientology when I was 16 years old. I started on staff when I was 21 years old. Approximately 9 years of my life went into Scientology. I currently do have a lawsuit against Scientology, and they have had several lawsuits against me that are still pending. Fair game. I've had my house bugged, my telephone bugged. I've had several setups that have happened to me since I started the lawsuit. My origination of why I got basically into the lawsuit was because, one, the cover-up of Quentin's death in Las Vegas, which was L. Ron Hubbard's son, which is still a mystery. 2, my brother-in-law shot his brains out with a gun. There are other cases that are similar to that. 3, the misrepresentation of what actually Scientology was doing.
Would you like to expound on any of these particular points?
Basically, what I relied on when I got into Scientology, I thought it was like a Vista organization. I was recruited under the deception that we were going to do exploration in Egypt. I thought it was a scientific thing that we're involved in. The fraud that Hubbard was a nuclear physicist and a scientist we were recruited in. There was quite a few of us at that time that were going to school at the University of Las Vegas, and we thought that basically what the group was like Vista, some kind of health organization that was doing research in different areas, and we didn't realize what we were getting into.
Can you tell us a little more about the misuse of auditing and
the first day that
severing family relationships?
The first day I started court proceedings, well, actually before I started court proceedings, my PC folders were sent to the press. Plus all the information in my PC folders was sent as public knowledge for anyone to have access to. It has been a lie since day one that your PC folders are confidential.
Excuse me, what's a PC folder again?
PC folders is information that you personally, if it's an upset with your husband, something you did when you were younger, it's anything personal that you have in your life that you wouldn't even maybe tell mom and dad. It's kind of like sitting down and doing a confession to a Catholic priest. And it's supposed to be very confidential. It is not. It is public information. And that was another one of the originations that actually started it. It is not something, people that are in Scientology get the idea that your PC folder is confidential. It is not.
What kind of relationship did this have on your family?
Divorce, split between parents. Of course, they had me disconnect from my parents. A child who is now 11 and stabilized, who was very unstable, which is my daughter. Relationships between my family. I was disconnected from my family for so many years. It took me a long time to kind of build that back up again. How I was made to disconnect was as I was taken by a lady named Pam Bevan to a room and put under auditing processes with another gentleman, and it was like what you would be called kidnap. And after thorough processing, and getting out of the room that I was in. And this was 2 weeks. No one else was there but these two people. I disconnected from my entire family. I was told that this was the next process, removed my money from the bank accounts and gave them all the money that I had. Oh, I signed waivers like most everyone else did. Waivers that I would not attack, threaten, or sue Scientology. Because I felt that my parents were enemies. I was put through an auditing process to, my parents were not the kind of people that I wanted around me. And I'd like to also state with that fact, my mother's a counselor and a psychologist, and my father's a retired Methodist minister. And my father had, when he was in the ministry, very briefly, a client come to him that was involved with Mayor Gazaris' setup that told him, right.
Yeah, that may be considered hearsay.
All right, we can't use that for legal reasons.
It's a separate issue that we're not here today to discuss.
Yeah, it's not only a question of hearsay, it could be a question of confidentiality of the priest-penitent privilege, which is the President of the State of Florida.
We will not hear that. Can you tell me something about living, and you were in Clearwater at one time living in...
Yes, I was.
Can you tell me about the sanitary conditions and the what they had for children, for adults, and tell me about what it was like to have especially young children, like an infant in the city of Clearwater in the hotel, and conditions of the RPF and the EPF.
At the time I was in Clearwater, there was a hepatitis epidemic that was being covered up, contagious.
When was that, please?
It was in 1977. Through 1976 and 77, people that were coming from California and Las Vegas area to Clearwater were coming back very ill. And at that time, I had no idea why until I got to Clearwater myself. I was in Clearwater for 8 weeks. The first day that I got to Clearwater, I became ill because of the food conditions that they had in the hotel. Reported to what they call their medical officer. And noticed that downstairs people were getting inoculations for different things. At that time, that second day, I didn't know until actually about 3 weeks later that there was actually a hepatitis cover-up going on. That was in 77.
All right, what about the children?
The children were kept. My room happened to be next to the nursery. And the nursery was, there were 2 young kids that were like 13 and 14 that were watching the children. Because I could hear crying, the children were separated from the parents, and I heard crying all night long. And being a mother, I made it a habit to look into those things. The kids were sick with flu. There wasn't any kind of clean area. The conditions were that all babies that were crying were left in one room to cry because they had reactive minds, and they were considered suppressive babies. And all kids that smiled and that were nice were left in another room, and which was really kind of a horrible experience for me as a mother. The other incident was, and another reason why they moved most of the children off of the base at that time, is there was a child, because of where the parking lot was situated at the back end of the Fort Harrison, the children were right next to the parking lot, and a child got out of that area and got killed behind that parking lot area. And that's when they made the decision that they had to move the children, one, because of the publicity, and the children are still in the city somewhere. At the time I was there, they were making the big move of getting the children out of the Fort Harrison. And the parents that had babies were very upset with the fact because they only had an hour for lunch, and they would not be able to see their children because where they were putting the children was an hour and a half to 2-hour drive, and they couldn't have that hour. See, parents were allowed 1 hour with their children at lunchtime, and that was it. And that hour meant that by the time they got there and had to be back on post again, they couldn't see their children. So the big upset was that the parents wanted to do something about it, but they actually couldn't. There wasn't, when the parents got off, a lot of the Sea Org members got off the ships, they started having babies because they were not allowed to have babies when they were on ship. And as a consequence, you had this overpopulation of small children. There was at least 15 small babies that were ranging between 3 or 4 weeks old, and I think the oldest was like 2 years old, tops there. And they were all young children in one confined area.
Why were the parents separated from their children, specifically their infants? And how can I'm not sure I understand about a suppressive infant. How do you know an infant is suppressive? Just simply because he cries?
Yeah. They're going through what's called a PTS. It's called a potential trouble source re-stimulation. And the way they audit the process is that the child must have somebody suppressive. If it's not the parent, someone in the immediate area that is suppressive to the child. So he is being re-stimulated, and so those children were put into separate rooms and just left to cry. And the basis of it is that the babies had to handle their own type of thing. And the reason the parents were split because it's nothing but work, work, work at the Fort Harrison. And the time that they saw their children was dinner break, and that's it. And then if they had liberty on Saturday, you're talking about working 15, 20 hours a day, and that's it. And there's no human relationship between the parents, basically. And then they got separated from that. The idea is to separate you from your family. And if you have children and you have that instinct, the children are little LRHs, as someone previously said.
As these children got to be 5 or 6 years old, did they attend school? At least the public school system, as we know it.
Some do, some don't.
Did the authorities in the Board of Education ever question or wonder or come by to check on the educational opportunities or mandatory requirements of the Scientology children?
Not while I was at Clearwater, and I did speak to kids that were the Commodore messengers that had not attended school. And one of the things why they were moving the children from the area, so the city particularly couldn't keep a handle on how many children were being born in Scientology. So when they became school age, no one would be able to find out whether they should be attending school or not.
How was that small child killed that you said was killed in the back?
It was accidentally run over by a car.
What about the RPF and the EPF?
I made a tour of the Fort Harrison while I was there, and I saw every single part of the building. The RPF was at the end of the stairwells on the floors at the very end, not on the upper floors because all public was on the upper floors, but on the bottom floors at the very far end. It's like a closet cubicle that 10 to 15 people were stacked up on each other. Smell, it's like a sweat box. It looked like a small concentration camp. There was basically, I tried to talk to someone that was in the RPF, that we were old friends, and he couldn't talk to me. They're not allowed to talk. Constant running. Chipping paint. At that time, they were chipping paint off cement. And when they finished that, someone would come down and drop some more paint on the cement, and they'd re-chip paint off the cement. And that was a big project at that particular time, was how much paint they could chip off the sidewalks. This was their major project. And as far as, it didn't matter whether they were female or men, the same thing was going on, but the conditions were really gross. No cleanliness, smelled bad. At that time, they were wearing all green. And I remember that really stuck out in my mind. And dark blue to signify that we were not allowed as public people to talk to these people. It was just one of the conditions. We were screened when we came in, and we were told that anybody in the RPF was going through heavy conditions orders and were not allowed to have communication. I have been through a similar thing called EPF in Las Vegas, so I'm very familiar with this whole process.
You were here from almost the beginning then. the beginning of the existence of the Church of Scientology in Clearwater?
No, I was in Las Vegas at the time that Clearwater was set up. I was not here when Clearwater began.
You say set up, that was...
I was in Las Vegas when the Fort Harrison was put here. We got orders in Las Vegas that the Fort Harrison was here.
I'll ask you the same question. I've asked at least one other, and maybe you can answer it. Why Clearwater, and why do they come in under the United Churches of Florida and not what they really are?
One of the reasons is you have to look at the area. It's basically an elderly area, very quiet. They figured that the people over a certain age bracket would not stand up and oppose what they were doing. Plus the area is kind of, a quiet little city, and they figured that no one in the city would make any kind of outcry, and that if they did, they could deal with someone over 50 because they figured, a few years down the line that they were not going to be here and they wouldn't really have to deal with them.
Didn't realize that elderly people would get more conservative of age?
They didn't realize conservativeness that was really in the area.
Just being quiet.
Yeah, they didn't actually see that they were going to have any problems in this area.
Okay, I have a lot more questions, but I would like to ask my colleagues. I would like to give them a chance, too. Who did I leave? Who do I start with this morning? Do you remember, Commissioners? Mrs. Garvey?
I was the last one.
You were the last one? All right. Did I start with?
Start with?
Then I'll start with you, Mr. Caldebank.
Linda, thank you for coming. You're very courageous from the very beginning, everything I know about you. On the bugging, you said that your phones were bugged as part of the fair game policy.
It's called fair game. It's the same.
When was that?
Well, since 79, 80, and 81.
79, 80, 81. How do you know that they were bugged?
My husband was a cop.
And he swept the lines?
Mm-hmm.
Was it ever reported?
Yes, it was reported several times. In fact, at one point in time in Boston, we had the telephone man just take the bugs out of the telephone.
Did the church ever tell you that any of this was going on when you came in or while you were a member?
Oh, that they were bugging?
Or that the GO was, or anybody was involved in this with the church?
That's going to happen. Oh, okay. I am very aware because I worked in the Hubbard Communication Office, and I can't get into total details about it because of my litigation legally still. But I was aware through my office of operations happening. There is a witness here that was in the Guardian's office when they did what's called Operation Schaick and Bake against me after I got out, who will be testifying of actual fair game that they actually did. She was still in Scientology at the time that they decided to do fair game, and this is very recent. This was in the last 2 years.
Okay, and during your stay in Scientology and when you first went in, you believed what you had read about Mr. Hubbard?
As being very sincere.
You believed that he was a scientist, a nuclear physicist?
Oh, absolutely. We had a full folio background that he had a degree from, different places, and that the guy was, well, I looked at him as an educated, qualified person. I realized that what we've gotten is falsified information.
Well, was that...
Basically when he, this is quite a few years ago, they've gotten rid of most of this information because since the cases have started, we've researched L. Ron Hubbard's degrees. And we found out it was Sequoia University. Oh, in the early years in the briefing courses? In the early years, we were told that Ron had a degree as a physicist, that he was a scientist. I found out later through doing a lot of research on different universities with the information that we were told that this is not true. That we finally came up with an affidavit which she had part in, I believe it's called, and I may have to correct this name, it's Sequoia University, that he had a degree that he gave himself, which he was notoriously known for giving himself his own certifications. But we were briefed on the fact, during those days we were giving, in every single front of the old books, the old Scientology books, you will find backgrounds on LRH of all these wonderful things that he did. If you notice your new books that are coming out, it's no longer being printed because we became aware by doing our research that he did not have these degrees that he professed to have. And those are being eliminated out of the front covers of the books now. They're changing that whole process, and we can put that in evidence if you want to see it. We have the old books here that show that he was supposed to have all these master degrees.
Does Mr. Kildebank, does that book have his
Yeah, this book was bought 5/6/82, and for the record, it's Exhibit 28, all about radiation, where it still has his background bibliography proclaiming his degrees and his education is a major selling point of the book.
The witness is getting into some legal conclusions, which would probably be better not to get into. But in any event, as when we tie all the evidence together at the end, with regard to the comparisons between the old biographies and the new biographies and the representations that are still made and the representations as they have been changed, I believe the evidence will show that the inference of deception that can be drawn from the fact of some of the changes and some changes that have not been made, such as holding himself out as the nuclear physicist on the cover of the new book, will indicate to this commission that the Church of Scientology has entered into a process whereby they have attempted to alter the language to some degree to cover the basic facts, but the inferences that people like Lavenda Van Schaick and anyone coming to Scientology, anyone coming to Clearwater receive is that he still has all those degrees, although some of the language has been changed. And when we begin at the end of these hearings to draw legal conclusions from the evidence, we will point those factors out to the commission.
Lavenda, I guess to sum up Mr. Hubbard's background, was his background a major point or a major encouragement, representation for you to spend money on courses?
Absolutely.
Did, in your mind, it give credence to the theories and the things that you were going to pay money for?
Absolutely.
Would you have spent that money if you had known that it was written in 3 months without research, as was testified earlier?
No, I would not.
Okay, you talked about the auditing process and how it was used. Were you told it was under confidence?
Absolutely. I found out that it was blackmail.
Strictest confidence is how it was sold to you, and it was sold to you as that.
And it is absolutely blackmail.
And you said about disconnect, breaking up your family. Were any of these confidential facts used in that process?
Yes, they were.
Were there any scientific guarantees given to you about auditing as to what it could cure? Was it sold to you as helping any of your problems?
Yes, and also medical at that time.
Can you give me a specific medical problem?
Headaches.
Headaches. Did it cure your headaches?
No, it gave me more headaches.
Okay. When you were in auditing, did the auditor ever tell you that it could not cure, specifically tell you that it could not cure any medical illnesses?
In 1979, when my auditor found out that I was leaving Scientology, she made me aware that it did not cure any kind of medical representation.
But while you were spending money before in the previous years?
After I ran out of money.
After you ran out of money. Okay. The waivers, did you understand them when you signed them?
No.
Did they make them out to you to be very legal documents?
Yes.
That would be upheld in a court of law if you left?
No, not in that sense. Legal documents as to, basically, for me to go into the Sea Organization, I had to sign a waiver. It was a conditional right to join staff in Las Vegas at that time. Oh, yeah, this is really cute. I signed a billion-year contract and another contract, and they're suing me for contract deception.
They're now trying to...
Yeah, I wonder what their approach would be if I offered to go back on staff.
So you are now being threatened
I'm being sued for breach of contract that I signed.
Okay, you said that living conditions in the Fort Harrison while you were there in '77 had a hepatitis epidemic.
Absolutely.
How did you know it was hepatitis?
Well, one, because of the inoculations that they were getting.
Who gave the inoculations?
Medical officer did downstairs.
Did you see any degrees on the wall?
No.
Did you see any certificates?
No, absolutely she has none whatsoever. She was not a nurse.
What was her name?
I want to say Mary Jane. It was Mary Ann something.
Mary Ann something? Okay, and you also said there was an attempt to cover up this epidemic from health officials in the city?
Absolutely.
How do you know that?
It's a combination of things. Our ED came back from Las Vegas with hepatitis, and she was put in an area where, well, she didn't stay as ED. She was kind of confined over to another area, and at that time, she had lost an extreme amount of weight. And I wasn't really aware of what the problem was until I got to Clearwater, and I have seen hepatitis before.
Okay, you have first-hand knowledge.
Yes,
You've seen it.
I know what hepatitis looks like. I have seen people go through that condition of extreme contagious hepatitis. And there was 15 people downstairs in the medical room at that time, and they were separating those people where they put me in. They wanted to make sure that I was a public person, that I didn't get any kind of contact with them at all. So they were putting me in a separate room, and these people were like quarantined, and they were stacked up against the walls. They were just incoherent, not there, very ill.
And how was that a cover-up?
Because I had ended up in an ethics situation talking to Ron Anderson at that time, the medical officer at that time, I had gotten I don't know if it was food or the water was very poor. I had gotten an infection in my mouth at that time, and the water that apparently was coming through my room was not really clean. And the medical officer gave me alcohol, and she told me to rinse my mouth out with alcohol and then swallow it. And I can imagine what the effects would have had. Luckily, I happened to take a whiff of the stuff before that occurred. And that's when I got into the discussion of what was happening with Ron, with the particular people down there. Of course, it's not discussed. And then I heard rumor with other staff talking about they couldn't talk about it. And I found out later from someone that's involved in my litigation legally that that's exactly what was occurring. It was my own guess.
The medical officer then prescribed a treatment that you knew was harmful to you, swallowing alcohol, denatured alcohol. Okay. The children that you talked about.
Yes, I want to answer that. Yes, that is true.
The children, you were supervised by a minor, a 13-year-old or 12-year-old?
13 and 14-year-old.
And they had many children that they were taking care of?
There was 15 at that time.
15, was this
or more.
Was this their job?
This was their job.
And they had, how long were they there supervising approximately these minors?
Well, the kids were not allowed in any public areas. One, because they were very dirty.
Dirty? And
it was bad public relations as far as people that were coming in and taking courses. And this was one of the real upsets, because you got a mother that would come in and say, oh, well, where's the nursery at? And, you know, she proceeded back into the nursery to find out how the Seaward children were doing. And then it was a constant problem, because being a mother, they, you know, living a normal life, just coming in as a public person and seeing the conditions of the children always was a continual upset on flag.
Would you characterize living quarters as sanitary or unsanitary?
Very unsanitary. There was buoy diapers on the floor. The babies had rashes from not being cleaned and changed on a regular basis. Runny noses. Most of them had the flu. They were really sick.
And would you say these children were supervised by someone well-trained in the area, or by the minors?
Well, I have to answer that honestly. I think that there was one 14-year-old that was very capable of handling children. She had too many to handle, unfortunately.
Okay. You never saw a child go to school, though, a public school?
No, never.
Why is that?
Because school is society.
Is that how would you refer to that as a church? Did the church say that directly, that school is not good for their children?
When my daughter was younger in Las Vegas, the only reason that she was sent to public school was because the public school system in Las Vegas threw a fit. about the children in the Las Vegas area. And the guardian's office, because they didn't want to stink at that time, said that we had to put our children in school, or my daughter would have never attended school.
To you, would it be a policy of the church to prevent children from going to public school?
Other than ample schools, or schools that have to do with Scientology.
Okay. You mentioned Quentin Hubbard's death.
Mm-hmm.
You said there were some questionable surroundings about that. Do any of those surroundings pertain to Clearwater at all?
He left Clearwater. He died in Las Vegas.
And your brother-in-law, you mentioned the R-245 process, and that your brother-in-law was found shot to death.
He was found dead in his room with a .45, with a gunshot. With a gunshot wound to his head.
Would you like to...
The result of David's death has never been really... David was doing some different things for the operation of the Guardian's office in Las Vegas. And at the time the police found him, he was found in a room with a .45 and a suicide note. He'd written a letter to my parents. He was married to my sister, and the last letter he'd written was how wonderful Scientology was, and he was doing a little mission. And anyway, the results of David's death put my sister under psychiatric care, and things have been basically the same since then. I don't think it will probably be the first or the last incident that will be uncovered through the next few years, and if people really kind of wise up and look at what's going on, I think the only question that could really be answered on Quentin or David's death would be Artie Marin, and it would be really nice if Artie appeared to these hearings.
Thank you. Mr. Burfield, do you have any questions? If you're finished, Mr. Curl, Mr. Goldberg.
Yes.
Mr. Burfield.
Yes, ma'am. I have a couple questions here. You said you had a suit that was pending against a Scientologist. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you sue them first, or did they sue you first?
Who attacked who first? They attacked me first.
By attacking, I mean following.
Who sued first? I sued first, legally.
We, one of our local newspapers, in this morning's newspaper, had been kind of led to believe that maybe we had not been grilling you people thoroughly enough to establish the authenticity of your statements. Mm-hmm. I thought we had, personally. I think that our interest is so deep in Clearwater. But I must ask this question even under the extreme emotional conditions. Did you come because you want to be vindictive towards a Scientologist, or what is your purpose in being here?
No, absolutely not. I care about the people that are down there at the Fort Harrison. I would really like to see them straighten up their act. I would like to see kids get an education, which I feel that they deserve. I would like to see the dirty tricks stopped. And I genuinely would like for the people that are in the Fort Harrison to realize that the people that are involved in my case or their own personal cases genuinely care about what's happening with those people, and basically just trying to let them know that there are other things that are going on that a lot of times then they won't find out about unless a hearing like this actually happened. And because you have so many different Scientologists in so many different areas, that one may not be aware of what's happening in Los Angeles or in other areas. My intention was never to be vindictive against Clearwater. My intention was just to actually expose the truth. And if they can handle the truth, fine.
Now, you earlier had made some statements about misrepresentation. Mr. Calderbank has gone over pretty well. But when you use the word misrepresentation, what does that mean to you?
They represent themselves as a religious organization.
Exclude the religion.
As far as auditing processes?
Yes, ma'am.
Auditing processes are supposed to be confidential. They are not. You go in with the attitude that you are getting an enlightenment and that your personal life will be private. That is not true. Your personal life, once you leave, is totally an exposure to press, an exposure to other family members, an exposure to your husband, an exposure to anyone that wants to see it.
Now, I realize I'm asking an opinion of a lay person, but in your opinion, the living conditions at Fort Harrison, is there a health problem there?
There was a health problem when I was there. Whether there is not, I have not been into the Fort Harrison in over 3 years now.
And if I also understand you, well, let's strike that. These technologies of fair game, the blowing student, and what have you, the last time you had contact with the Scientologists, were those still in effect?
Absolutely. Have never changed from day one.
One of the biggest questions I've been asked by people is, you appear to be well above average and adjusted to this. What would cause a person to go into Scientology?
I think all people kind of have an inner nature of genuinely caring about other people. I think people that get in the organization usually are people that should go in the service or Vista or Red Cross, or they generally, they're people that I consider that have what's called a help instinct.
Okay.
Mr. Burkfield, I understood that question to mean to call for her opinion as to what she thinks the inner reasons are, and not to be a question of the type, what representations were made to her at the outset that induced her to go in. Rather, her inner feelings that she experienced is one of the motivating factors.
That was a general question, and the next one was going to be more specific as to what motivated you to go into it.
What representations?
What representations?
Representations of, well, L. Ron Hubbard's background and what the group stood for.
And you stayed in roughly 9 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
Somewhere along the line, did you come to the conclusion that these representations were not correct or true? Or
That's why I'm out.
did this happen at the very end, or did you have doubts along the line, or what?
I don't understand the question. I mean,
Well,
you mean, did I doubt it on and off down the
Yes.
line as I was in? Yes. I didn't have the mental stability at that time to get out. I couldn't get out.
What do you mean you couldn't get out?
I was so indoctrinated with the whole group that I mentally couldn't bring myself to getting out. I couldn't get out.
Could I interpret that you're saying that they had control over your mind to the point that
Absolutely.
the courses that you audited courses here in Clearwater, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Those courses that you last audited here or took here in Clearwater, how could you define those in layman's terms? Were they true courses, or were they misrepresented, or what?
Well, it's interesting because the courses I took here were what's called the Hubbard Communication Ethics Officer. And basically what that is to establish ethics in the community and to have the organization run on a very ethical process. And I realized that after I finished the whole course that that's not what was being represented in Clearwater. I took a course that was totally false.
Do you know the meaning of the word Dianetics?
Yeah, Dianetics is through the mind. That's exactly what it is. It's through the mind. Through the mind, you get caught.
Just a little off the subject, but it goes along the line. I noticed in the same morning's paper that I was reading that the city of Austin, Texas, was requesting they declare a day of Dianetics. Do you think Clearwater ought to declare a day of Dianetics? I mean that to be...
Almost every other city has.
Why?
Well, it's public relations. It's a great way to get the public interested in to what they consider very good public relations, and to get city and government officials thinking that they are very, we're just the nice guys. It's what's called the big scam of promoting to agencies, especially politics and press, that they are the nice guys when they are not the nice guys.
I have just two other questions here I'd like to ask you. You've heard some of the testimony that has been given here, is that correct?
Absolutely.
In your mind, as a layman, do you feel that we have been fair in attempting to protect the truth about Scientology?
Yes, I'd like to hear the other side. I hope the other side comes and appears. I really do. I don't want this as a one-sided session. I hope that they do show up and they do appear. But I want them. It's too bad that they couldn't let the staff of the Fort Harrison sit in on these proceedings. Of course, the staff is told not to read newspapers or communicate with anyone that has left Scientology. And I would have really have liked the whole staff to attend this, because I consider it a committee of evidence, and I'm sure that staff would understand that totally.
One last question, and I ask this of everyone. You answered the mayor's question as to why Scientology moved here. But if you could tell the people of Clearwater just one thing or a short statement as to what they should be looking at, what would you say to us?
Just be careful of the nice guy that's smiling on the outside, extending his hand with good public relations, because you'll find out in the long run when your own personal life is exposed some way to that individual, and they have ways of finding out those things, that you will find out that it will be used against you.
And you use the word nice guy. Could you be just a little more specific there?
I'm talking about people that are currently in the Guardian's office at the Fort Harrison. They're creating an image of that they are going to be nice guys now. It's interesting that a religion has been not a nice guy for a long time.
We don't want to talk about religion.
All right, well, whatever. An organization has not been they have not represented what they really are. I am glad that the hearing is here, because there are people that are out of Scientology that are trying to represent to press and to people exactly what they are. And it's like the only reason the witnesses are here at this time, we were in for a long time. We know how things are covered up. We know exactly what is going on. And no matter how nice they say that they are being as an organization, I believe it for about 2 days. And that's my extent of it. And it is just a nice front that changes, and it will go back to exactly what it has always been, no matter what kind of public relations that they put out to press or put out to anyone else. I have not seen that dramatic of a change in the organization, and I don't personally believe them. And anyone else that does, that's entirely up to them.
Just as an aside, before you go to Mrs. Garvey, you were hoping the Scientologists would participate or watch these. The Scientologists are taping this entire 4 days, and I hope that they will show it to their people within the organization at an opportune time, and gather them in a big, great hall up there in Fort Harrison.
I doubt that staff will ever see this film.
Well,
other than the Guardian's office, and that's really unfortunate. Other than them splicing something, I doubt that staff will see this film.
They are here and taping it verbatim, and it's in total. Mrs. Garvey.
Ms. Van Schaick, you said you were here in Clearwater in '77?
Mm-hmm.
What What period? What month were you?
It was in the summer. It was, let me see, it was March, April, it was May, June. It was during the hot months, May and June, just before it started to get real hot.
Oh, okay. I was going to say we have an awful lot of hot months. You left the organization in '79, right?
That's correct.
You made an interesting comment about that when you came to Clearwater, you made a tour of the Fort Harrison. Why would you make a tour of the Fort Harrison? Is that your standard policy when you go someplace that you would tour the building?
I was ethics trained in the organization. And standard policy from someone that's ethics trained is basically just to see what's going on in the area. It's the way I was programmed for so many years.
Well, I think that's interesting because you're the first one that's ever really knew what was going on. I mean, they never went beyond their room and their training, it seemed.
I had kind of a freedom in the Fort Harrison. See, I'd been in for years. And being that I was taking an ethics course...
They didn't doubt that you would ever question anything?
Yeah, that I would never question what was going on. Basically, they didn't think, and definitely that I wouldn't report it. I mean, the course that I was taking was ethics. So someone that's taking those kind of courses surely isn't going to go around to press anybody and expel on what's going on.
You also made comment that you're part of the Sea organization, and yet you came here as a public person?
Yeah, I was in Sea Org and changed my contract because I was working for the mission of the Meadows. And when you work for a mission, you sign a regular contract instead of a Sea Org contract.
Your billion-year contract is then null and void?
They canceled our billion-year contract, and this is going to sound outrageous, in Las Vegas because we didn't have a ship we could stick in the middle of the desert and do what's called Project Zero. And it's really, we didn't have a ship. We had to go with what was called Product Zero at that time, and we had this little rowboat in the lake, in this lake out in Lake Mead. Anyway, they had to cancel our Sea Org contracts in Las Vegas, basically because we couldn't go through this ship training because there was no ship. You can't put a ship in the desert.
Well, how do they go through this sea training in Clearwater? Do they
Well, they had the ship. Their objective was the Apollo and the Excalibur were here in port at different times, and they were going to take each staff member from the Fort Harrison and go through what's called this Product Zero. And then in Los Angeles, they also had the ships off port there, so you could go through regular sea training duty, but we weren't capable of putting a ship in the desert, so we had our Sea Org contracts canceled.
So if you were a public person and the living conditions that you lived in were fine?
I had my own room to myself.
Did you go into any of the staff rooms or their living quarters?
The only staff that I was in was executive staff.
Which would have been...
Would have been the same kind of quarters as mine. Either they had their own room, other than I walked into where the RPF was downstairs. That was quarters.
That was a small closet-type area with 15 bunks, is what you said earlier.
Yeah, people just stacked up sleeping.
What about, was there anything in the garage at that time? We were told earlier that that's where dorms were. Did you get to the garage?
That was their dorm.
No, that locker room, it only had 15. The Weaver reported they had 54.
Oh, and the dorms down. See, the way they had the room set up, there was different kinds of staff there. There was staff for just the public that had money. Then there was staff for the staff, and there was 7 different orgs at that time, 7 different organizations operating at that particular time. There was a guardian's office, and then there was a public. It's a very complicated. I don't want to get into all the organization details, but it would take too long. Anyway, the staff downstairs basically had, some of them had their own rooms, some were sharing rooms. The ones that were single, I couldn't have told you how many staff at that particular time. There was probably, I think, about 350 staff operating.
Executive staff or?
All staff.
All staff.
I'm talking about all staff. And then it varied between 350 and 400 people back and forth at that time.
Okay. What were you told about the Guardian office when you first joined?
That it was a protective organization, part of Scientology.
In the outline we've given, there's a comment about illegal aliens that are working in the Fort Harrison. Could you elaborate a little bit more on it?
I can't get into it because of legal reasons
Okay.
right now.
Through the years that you were there, what were you promised or what guarantees were you given when you continued auditing?
Well, basically that I would have no more problems. That's just a very simple basic.
Did you have any encounter with a blown student?
Yes, I did.
Someone that was physically brought back?
Yes, I have physically brought back people myself.
You have?
Yes.
You made
And I can't get into that still because
I'm not going. Just back to you would testify to. Okay. You made comment that you were in the...
Okay. I can testify on that.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to stay away from my case.
Right.
There were several incidents where I had to go out and get blown staff members because I handled that particular area. And whatever it took at that time, you know, if we had to bodily set the guy in the car to bring him back. And I brought back, I guess through the years, probably, I don't know, maybe different times where we had to stick somebody in a car, 25 staff.
What happened? Are you aware what happened to that blown student once they came back to base?
As far as base, they got RPF. Now, are you talking about a student or a staff member?
Whoever that would blow and come
people
back.
that were public persons that maybe would leave the course room or not be there for a while were not RPF'd.
Okay. It was just the staff that would blow.
People with money were not RPF'd. And that's the essential...
Good rationale. You mentioned you were an EPF.
It's the same as RPF. It's a state projects force. We laid carpet and painted walls.
Why were you an EPF?
Can I get into that?
I'm just trying to establish that this is a standard policy of theirs.
Briefly, because I had an upset with an executive in the organization, well, I've been in EPF several different instances. The one that I could probably expand on the most is I disagreed with the fact that Barbara Glass wanted to leave my 5-year-old locked up in a building by herself and leave her there. And I did. That was the first time. That was one of the last times I actually got EPF'd because I got in a fight with an executive officer because I refused to let them lock my child up for any reason.
See why you blew. Your husband, is your husband a Scientology? Or
No, he's not.
He's not. Okay, I can't think of anything else I was going to ask.
Mr.
Freeloader's debt. Were you charged a freeloader's debt when you left?
What was the last amount? 22,000. It was from an enormous. I think it was 22,000 I was charged after I worked 15 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You were here in '77. Did that not give you a feeling that there was something wrong?
Yes, that actually, my experience with being at Clearwater, I knew definitely something was wrong.
But you still weren't able to leave yet?
Not until almost a year later. I didn't pull things really together for almost a year after that.
Okay.
Mr. Hatchett?
I probably have 2 questions, please. You spoke in terms of that child that was accidentally killed in the parking lot.
Yes.
Did you actually witness that yourself?
No, I did not.
How close did you know the evidence may have been true? Someone told you, you knew the ambulance picked him up?
Someone told me, and there was a lot of uproar at that. Just before I got there, there was a lot of uproar going on. And that's when the whole change came about, that all the children had to be removed from the Fort Harrison.
And where did they place them?
Good question.
What was the question, Mr. Hatchett?
Where did they place the children?
Where did they place the children after removing them from the Fort
I have no idea.
But you knew where yours was.
Mine is with me, thank God.
I mean, during this time.
Mine was not, thank God, in Clearwater at that time.
Will you ask her if the death of this child was ever reported to the police?
Good question. Was the death of the child ever reported?
As far as I know, no.
All right. To establish whether or not the guardian officer was following policy, when they use shake and bake against you, is that the correct term?
Yes, it's called shake and bake.
All right. Were you aware that this was a written policy?
No, I wasn't aware of really shake and bake until someone had actually left the guardian's office that told me. I know what they had done to me. Shake and bake was the name of what they were doing to me.
Can you describe what shake and bake is or was?
Well, I received two different incidents. One was a setup where I was told by Pam Bevan that she had cancer, so I was to go over and get prescriptions of pills at a motel for her cancer, not realizing at the time that they were taking photographs of me outside of the motel, and that there were 7 people upstairs and a woman that looked like me that stayed in the motel to throw a big scene like there was an orgy happening upstairs in the motel. Now, that was not an incident that they completed, because I became aware, it was like a few incidents, I became aware that in the motel that something was going on. There was a setup, so we got people out there to the motel, and of course there was 7 Scientologists checked into the motel that disappeared right out. They just totally disappeared out of the motel. The other one was an incident where they sent a gentleman by the name of Gary Klingler to me to say things that my husband was having affairs, that my attorney was working with the CIA, that I should get rid of my attorney. And I stole that document that he had written out from the guardian's office, which is public evidence on my case. Oh, by the way, Pam Bevan was my auditor and was also responsible. She was also the person that was in charge of setting me up. It's ironic that they stick your auditor, the person that you give all your personal information to, as your key person to attack you after you get out. They have all of your personal information about you. I don't think I'll be the last case that they've used that with.
Thank you.
Any other questions of you, Mr. Shoemaker?
I just have one. It's my understanding that you were physically detained.
Yes, I was.
Could you explain that a little bit, please? Or what happened?
I was brought to a room. What's the date? It would have been 1974 of February. And the house I have since located is out in the middle of the desert in Las Vegas. It was with Pam Bevan and another guy, and I still don't know the guy's name at that time. Basically, I was stuck under heavy auditing processes.
Was there something leading up to this as to why?
Money. I had money in an account, and they basically wanted the money I had in the account.
You were actually locked up and were not allowed to leave?
I was not allowed to leave. Whether the front door was constantly locked 24 hours a day, I could not answer you that question because I stayed in one room, in a bedroom. So I don't, if it was or not, I was not coherent enough because I felt like I was really drugged out for quite a period of time. I was not home at all.
A while ago, you made a comment about PR, or that was, I think you said, well, that's just PR, or public relations, relating to a question that Commissioner Burfield came up with. Are there procedures that are established relating to public relations in terms of how these things are dealt with people outside the organization?
Anytime there's bad press or an ex-Scientologist reporting the truth, they do a whole campaign to show what a nice guy they are, like open house. They clean up their act, basically. And when press dies down and other people like myself that are ex-Scientologists go back with their normal lives, they say it's kind of like a joke to them. We've done this, I did this several times in Las Vegas with city officials there in Las Vegas. Anytime we had a kind of an upset, we go through a cleaning house number, remove our children to different places, And it happens in every Scientology organization across the United States.
And you personally had first-hand knowledge of this occurrence? I mean, you actually participated?
We've done a cleanup in Las Vegas. And at the time that I was on flag, they were doing a cleanup with the children, getting the children out of the area.
Thank you.
I'll get back to the child that was run over. I have no reason to believe that it certainly was. I'm sure it was an accident, but you don't know that if it was reported, or you say you don't think it was reported to the police?
I don't know whether it was reported or not. The child was only like 2 years old.
Do you know the name of the child?
Yeah, but I'm afraid of getting in a lawsuit.
All right.
I don't...
On this particular issue, for the information of the Commission, we have been investigating it for some time, and I've had some conversations with 1 or 2 city officials about it. And I can say that my office is currently investigating it. There is a person who has some knowledge about the subject, and at the present time, however, our investigatory efforts are inconclusive.
I understand. You contributed a lot of money, and the organization received a lot of money. Do you know what that money went for? I mean, apparently you weren't. They were not. Well, I will not speculate. What did the money go for?
What did it go to?
You've taken millions of dollars a week, certainly millions a year in Clearwater. Where did all that money go?
So L. Ron Hubbard could live very comfortably, and the executive staff could live very comfortably, is my assumption. I haven't seen money go back to staff, and I'm sure that the staff currently at the Fort Harrison, if they ever sit down and look at their CGI or their gross income and ask themselves the question as to really where all this money is going, they would probably, if they really studied their income policies really closely, they would find out that it's not definitely going back into staff, and it's not going back into what they think that it's going back into. I would say it's going into people's pockets.
Well, these allegations and question, why didn't it take you so long to start raising these questions in your own mind? Why did it take you so long?
After 9 years, you become indoctrinated with one thing, and you tend to believe that one thing. The only thing I can say is I've been out for over 3 years now, and it's only till the last year I could say my life has gone normal for me. It's a mental, you become a mental cripple, and you're terrified with the fact that if you leave, that your life will be exposed on a kind of a public board. There are things that people all personally hide, whether it's a first kiss with a boyfriend, or that you all keep that are very personal, private things in your life. And those things are all given to your auditor. And there's nothing that they could personally do to me. And my life is public record. And it's like, how many people sitting in this courtroom would like their life public record?
Did you continue to receive auditing after you learned the information would be made public?
Oh, no. I have not received any auditing.
No. After, when you were within the organization, and you know that information that you were giving could be used against you, did you continue to receive auditing in spite of the fact that you knew that?
No, I wasn't aware until after I got out that my auditing was going to be used against me. Honestly. I don't think any person's really aware until they get out that their auditing is public information. You don't believe anything. You couldn't possibly, if you're a staff member, believe anything other than that the group is great. And you don't believe that that's true. You're conditioned and brainwashed, and you don't believe those things until they happen.
Why did you disconnect from your family?
Because my parents were supposed to be suppressive people as far as Scientology was concerned. I found that my parents are the most sanest people that I have around me currently.
With all these things going around in Clearwater, why didn't you call the, well, I guess You probably answered the question, why didn't you call the Board of Health? But apparently you were dependent on them, and you just believed that. I'm not going to speculate.
That's a totally different issue. I did end up in an upset over that, and rather than being in Clearwater and having my child in Las Vegas, it's not a very cool thing to get in fight with the executives in Clearwater, having your child in a different place, and start a Board of Health meeting. And I was too indoctrinated to realize that I had citizenship. I didn't realize I was a citizen until 3 years ago.
You didn't realize you were a citizen?
Absolutely. I've not been a citizen of the United States. I've been a citizen of Scientology.
Oh, you don't mean that you're an alien?
No, I'm not an alien in that sense, no.
Do you remember where the children were kept when they were taken a mile or an hour and a half ride from the Fort Harrison?
No.
Didn't they?
Before.
The children were at Clearwater when I was there. They were setting up a different facility at that time, and the parents were upset because the facility was being removed from the Fort Harrison. Where the children ended up, only the parents at the Fort Harrison could answer that.
Okay.
Where were they kept? At the Fort Harrison?
Well, at the Fort Harrison, where were they kept? In the back?
In the back, right behind the parking lot.
Didn't the parents ever question that they don't want the children taken an hour and a half drive away?
Yeah, there were some parents that questioned that, and they got RPF'd.
Well,
there were parents that definitely did question that. You know, motherhood and fatherhood is something that is a natural instinct. And thank God for it, because that's why a lot of us, as we got older, got the hell out of there.
what did it take you? What was your personal thing? What did it take you to start raising questions? What was the final straw that you just said, I've got to start questioning and I've got to get out of this organization?
David's death.
David's death. That's your brother-in-law.
Right.
Well, you said it. Yeah. You know, you're a mother, and I assume a good one and all, but when you saw these children in such deplorable conditions and living in such deplorable conditions, and infants being known as repressive, didn't that bother you? Why didn't you report it to somebody in authority within this county or city governments or the police department in this county?
I had this huge ideal that I could straighten it out internally in the organization, that it could be corrected as an internal problem. With the training that I had, knowing policy and the way the operation of the organization was running at that time, that I figured that it all could be handled internally and straightened out. And that was probably my basic concept for a lot of years. And then realizing 9 years later that nothing really internally gets handled, that it really doesn't. It's one game against another, one farce against another, and that the whole thing is a lie.
Well, the whole organization, in fact, these hearings have had a very disquieting effect on the city of Clearwater. But if we had some sort of other forum in the future for other people that are currently involved in the Church of Scientology who would like to come forward, do you think that'd be worthwhile?
Absolutely. I think that through the years you'll have more and more Scientologists leave the organization. I consider myself a minor person that has left the organization compared to people that have been in 20, 30 years or longer. I think what would be interesting is it's kind of like you're only skimming the top of the very top. And there are things that people will have no idea until 5 or 10 years. The other things that we will find out, and I find out, and we get documented as we go on, that there were a lot of things that happened, and there are a lot of things that still will come out. And I don't know. Maybe we ought to take lie detector tests, and maybe somebody believe us then. That's what the E-meter is. You know. I can't answer the question.
Why would you participate in bringing someone back against their will? Didn't that follow you either?
Policy.
It's policy, okay. I had one other question, but... You mentioned that your mind, you felt like your mind was controlled. How was your mind controlled? By just by the same thoughts, repetition, or how do they control your mind?
Well, if you took a good look at Korean brainwashing, no sleep, long hours, when you have someone that when you take someone and you don't put them on a diet, a normal diet of food, and you're eating a diet of heavy starches, 15 to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, no freedom, no freedom to really enjoy what's going on in life. I'm sure if I was at the Fort Harrison on staff now that Saturday would probably be a big thrill if I got liberty and could see the beach. You don't really have, you're not capable, you get so entwined into the organization and repetitious, the terminology, it's like a secret terminology, and it's like a little clique when you're in high school, and you get caught up into that whole game and the constant over and over and over and over again, the same thing. It's just like when your dad says, tie your shoes, tie your shoes, tie your shoes. And you tie your shoes.
Seems to me that I've asked this for one other witness, that it seems that your house divided against itself, and I don't know how you could trust each other. I mean, if you're forced to work long hours and for little or no pay, and your child is rarely with you, and others are participating like that, how in the world do you learn that this organization held together? I mean, without trust and friendships and loyalties.
They think that they all trust one another, that they're working for one goal of mankind, which is a real fascinating thing. And if the staff really took a look at internally what's going on, I'm sure they've seen their GO personnel and their high executives are sure not in target lines presently. If the staff presently looked around at all their heavy weights that were there a year ago, they sure are not putting their names on any kind of policies, and they're letting some dumb staff member, as far as I'm concerned, become the scapegoat, the guy that's going to end up in a committee of evidence is the fool that puts his name. The only thing I can say, guys, don't ever put anything in writing, you know? Make sure that you don't put it in writing, because that was L. Ron Hubbard's stable datum, and that's exactly how you get yourself nailed. Don't put it in writing, because you'll find out eventually it gets used against you.
Well, like Mr. Walters was in for 17 years or more. 2 ladies were in for 17 years. You're in for 9 years. When all these people leave, who's left running the store?
What would be really interesting is when all the people leave, what they will have is what we used to call in ethics the psychotic cases. They will be the guys that are left there at the Fort Harrison. It'll be very interesting to see how the Fort Harrison operates at that point in time. Because I think that the able beings, and I'm seeing what's going on, and as far as I'm concerned, the able beings are getting out. They're not becoming the scapegoats anymore. And the smart ones will get out. And what you will be left with is a lot of crippled psychotic kids that have no backbone, their moral justice will be tied into, it's like a Nazi German camp. Spy, you know, who can spy on who. And you will probably at that point in time have to have a lot of heavily trained people that know how to help them.
Will they be classified as good Germans?
Well, if they take a look at what's going on, that's exactly what's happening.
I I have no other questions. I think that we've been questioning you long enough. Mister, you have something you must add?
Just one more. Lavenda, you were an auditor and you had a lot of professional knowledge in both giving and taking the auditing of Scientology in their courses and in their background. As a professional opinion, then would you feel that public scrutiny of financial transactions
Absolutely.
in the church
Absolutely.
would either prevent you from giving or prevent students from taking or impinge their freedom?
Absolutely.
It would absolutely not prevent them, or it is absolutely needed to further this ability to...
You mean as far as, I'm not sure if I understand, giving them money?
With the scrutiny of their financial transactions.
The scrutiny of what they're doing currently with their financial things?
Would that have prevented you from giving...
Oh, if I had been aware of what the high executives were doing with the income and been aware of what was really going on, I sure as hell wouldn't have been in Scientology as a staff member.
But what I'm asking is, would that have prevented you, financial scrutiny of the transactions, would that have prevented you from taking your courses or giving your courses, and you were a professional auditor?
Would it have prevented me from giving courses?
I think she's answered.
Right.
Yeah, I've answered the question, yes. I would not give courses if I had known what was going on with the income.
Okay, I
don't think I understand it in any other sense.
I believe that you have in various ways, but do you want to... Are you satisfied?
Would it have affected the freedom of the religion?
We don't want to talk about freedom of religion. That's another issue that we shouldn't get into. I want to ask this question for the city attorney. He wants to know about this big scam that you've mentioned in publicity and promotion, and how is this big scam accomplished? You mentioned something called a big scam.
10% of their CGI has always been unaccounted for. And basically it's the gross income is what you take off the top of the organization. In each city there is most of them, like in Las Vegas, there was a mission, and then there was what's called an org, or the main organization. The mission holders basically were in control up until recently over monies that were going in and out of the organization, which made a lot of mission holders very wealthy, until they have recently changed that. The orgs were taking all of their money and sending it on to Los Angeles and to Clearwater. And they were basically just the workhorse. It's like the lower working class of the whole organization is what basically the orgs are. And while the orgs are taking on getting people in and flowing the money process, the executives are living pretty high on the hog if they really take a look at what's going on.
Would it be safe to assume then if an org takes in $500,000 a week that $50,000 would be going to someone else?
Absolutely.
Off the top.
Sure.
You have this?
One question.
One question.
To your knowledge, Clearwater is flag base?
Absolutely.
So all orders would come out of Clearwater. Whatever happens in the organization will come out of flag base, which is Clearwater.
Through Clearwater. Everything gets cleared through Clearwater. Clearwater is the seed of the operation.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your testimony. You're another very bright woman, and we admire you and thank you for coming.
At this time, I'm going to introduce an affidavit from Stephen Garetano, and I'll read briefly from it. In order to save some time, I'll skip over portions of it and read the pertinent portions into the record. My introduction to Scientology was in January of 1977, when the following representations were made to me concerning the benefits of auditing in Scientology. These representations were that auditing was scientifically guaranteed to confer the following benefits. And then there's a number of them listed, which I won't read. And then there's a statement about Mr. Hubbard's background and Mr. Garetano's reliance on them. Based on the above representations, I joined the Church of Scientology. After 2.5 years experience, As a Scientologist, I eventually discovered that the above representations were false and made for the single purpose of enticing people to purchase auditing and courses into our joint staff. In early 1979, I was at Flag Land Base in Clearwater, Florida. I contracted an illness which was later diagnosed to be hepatitis. I received an injection hypodermic needle from a Scientologist dressed in a white uniform, which I was told was a hepatitis vaccine. To my knowledge, this individual was not a medical doctor. I was later diagnosed by my father, Dr. Garitano, in the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, to have suffered from hepatitis, mononucleosis, and strep throat. While in Clearwater, I observed the living conditions of staff members to be unsanitary. On one occasion, I entered a small room which was constructed to facilitate one occupant, inhabited by a minimum of 8 people. These individuals slept in 2 triple bunks and 2 single beds. The conditions for those individuals imprisoned in the Rehabilitation Project Force, RPF, were unhealthy and unsanitary. Those individuals were forced to live and sleep in the garage, and it's signed Stephen Garitano under the pains and penalties of perjury. If need be, Mr. Garitano at some point could be called to testify.